guys, welcome back to 1989 Mall Crawler. Today's video is going to be about an Offenhauser Dual Port versus a Clifford. I'm going to do it in two different videos. This first video is going to be basically the Offenhauser versus Dual Port, right? The second video is going to be more on the technical side, or like the theory side of how it's supposed to work, why it's supposed to work, my thoughts on it. Which doesn't amount to much, but what I think happened, stuff like that. So this first video, this one right here, is basically like, typical performance stuff. Which one to buy, how to install it, and is it better than another one? Which what I have to compare it to is a Clifford, right? So let's get into it. There it is. Pretty cool design, I think. I don't know how the hell they cast these things. It's pretty complicated. Very cool intake. Offenhauser makes a few different types depending on the year. They do not make one for the 4.0, even though that's what I used it on, or the 4.0 head. But if you have a 258 or 4.0, what you want to do is get the 6257 DP, which is for the 1981 and 1995 Jeep. And the reason you want it is because you'll see in red how short the little bolt flanges are. Also, it has provisions that has bolt holes for the power steering bracket, right? They have another one, which is the 5999 DP. That's for 71 to 81, which I think is the 232 engine. Anyhow, that one has much longer flanges and no bolt holes for your power steering bracket. Now, I personally see my videos. I don't bolt in my power steering bracket. I did actually on this one when I installed this one, because I was like, oh, look at that, it lines up. My Clifford, I don't really worry about it. They sell another one, which is a 6258C, which is basically open plenum, just like the Clifford, right? So that's more so for high RPM. If you talk to Offenhauser, they will tell you straight up that the DP, the dual port, which is not dual plenum and not dual plane, but the dual port is for low RPM, high torque, right? So you're not going to get the high RPM screaming that you will out of the dual port as you will out of their C series or the Clifford. And they tell you that. And so this kind of stuff I'll go over why in the second video, as I said. But this is what also made me want to prompt this particular test that I did, because it's not really, there's a lot of, mysticism and lore, so to speak, on the internet. Like, I guess Vizard tried one years ago when they first came out, but it was on a V8, but nonetheless, the same principles applied. And he was like, oh, it lost horsepower, and this, that, and the other, but they aren't made for that. They're not made for high torque. So a dyno won't pick it up because they're supposed to work below the dyno threshold. So slow 4x4ing, towing, things like that. And also miles per gallon, gas mileage. Anyways, I'll get into that in a second bit. So here's how you install it, because they don't make it for the 4.0, for the higher intake port. Basically get yourself a gasket, mark where the dowel would be, the alignment dowel, get the filing. This is all, if you've ever done like a 258 intake on a 4.0 head, this is all pretty standard. The one issue I did run into, which was kind of funky, is I had to grind out some of the runners and the space basically where the washers would go. Now, I use the newcomer kit, which basically the fasteners have two little wings, which made my life a little bit easier. But if you use the stock ones with the big washers, big round washers to clamp on the intake and the exhaust, you're probably going to have to cut out some of that washer to make like a quarter of it, to make kind of like a Pac-Man head shape, so to speak. Cut out part of the pie, because they're thick boys. They're as thick as my dog Schlutz, and yeah, he's chubby, but it's mostly fur. Anyhow, you can see here where it gets really tight up in there. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure if you look on like Summit and Quadratech and all those kind of guys, they say not to use these intakes with specific headers, and that's probably why. So I didn't grind down any of my headers, but if you have some crazy header system, there's a good chance that you may have to or grind these down to make it fit, because you can see even below the fastener, that space gets really tight really quick. And it's a heavy intake, no lie. Right here I film it, you can see the walls are like super thick, weighs way more than my stock intake and my Clifford intake. Yep, and it's got some funky shapes inside. There you go, that's the install. You just got to go slow, careful, and you may need to grind a little bit. So as I said before, can't really dyno it. So the test I devised to see which one's better, so to speak, my idea was to do 1,000 RPM, 1,200 RPM, or sorry, 1,250 RPM, and 1,500 RPM, so 1,500 RPM. And I set them using my poor man's idle, which actually I got to use because I had to use the Jeep for work because my van got back into by a porta potty truck. Yeah. I know. Shitty situation. Anyways, so I would set these exact points, these RPM points, with my poor man's idle or my high idle, and then I found a hill that was about 8-9 degrees, and I let out the clutch fairly slow, and then see which one. Basically, the Offenhauser and the Clifford got, same RPM, everything, and then see which one would climb up the hill without stalling or whatever, and then compare them. I did this with gas. I also did it with propane. The reason I did propane, and I'll go over more so flow and stuff like that in the next video, but I did it because the primaries and the secondaries basically have their own intake, and they're slapped together to make one intake. So it's super thin, the primaries. And I was worried about basically shear. So as the primaries, the air-fuel mixture, even if it's vaporized, comes out and turns a corner to go into that thin intake, of which is the primary intake, I was worried about the fuel separating from the air. So propane doesn't have that issue. It's a vapor under pressure. And it doesn't stall nearly as easily as fuel because of that. In theory, you can run propane a propane run engine upside down. Like, it's crazy stuff. If you ever driven a vehicle with propane, like a forklift, they're nuts. Like, they're crazy. Not as much power as gas, which is really weird. It's a different timing setting and all that, and different, which I don't worry about. But anyways, for what I do, but it's weird. It's like instant throttle response. Like, it's almost better than fuel injection, if not the same. It's crazy. But anyway, so I ran those tests back to back. I did 1,000 Offie, 1,000, 1,250, and 1,500 on the Offenhauser. Then I did the same with the Clifford, all on fuel, and then I did propane all over again, right? So let's get into what we found. So here's the first test. So it was red brick road, so sorry about my crappy filming. But here's the first test. Clifford to the right, Offenhauser to the left at 1,000 RPM. And I had to bail it out. So the Offenhauser was going to stall. Then we have 1,250. Both of them kind of stood their own on this one. Offenhauser still a little bit lower RPM than the Clifford, but it did make it up the hill. And then here's 1,500 RPM. Mind you, this is fuel. This is gas. And just as you would expect, kind of the same, just higher RPM, kind of the same as the 1250 and so on. But the Clifford still performed better. So then I switched to propane, basically higher velocities, which is kind of the leading theory behind this. Higher velocities in tight corners don't affect propane like they do fuel and a carburetor. So let's see how it does at 1,000 RPM. Offenhauser gets real low. And I had to bail it out. That's why you'll see the RPM of it raised before the Clifford, because I didn't want to stall. I did, I think I actually might have been, nah, there was one I stalled and I actually rolled backwards. That sucked. This is at 1250 RPM with propane again. And the Offenhauser, it's getting real low. Then it poops the bed, and I rolled backwards, which really sucked, because I don't have an e-brake. But anyhow, I got it started back up. Got it back out. So then we have 1,500. Now see, the Offenhauser at higher RPM doesn't drop down nearly as much in ratio to what it did. So it gets pretty low though, so, I don't know, 650, something like that. And it starts catching up, the Clifford, it starts catching up in performance with the Clifford. Clifford's at about the same RPM. But they both made it through. So with this test, for me at least, the Clifford is the winner. Now, if you see something and you're like, oh, bro, you should have made it more rich or this, that, and the other, because then I totally leave it in the comments and I don't mind trying it again. I think it's a super cool intake. I think it has some inherent issues. But like I said, second video, please stick around and watch the second video if you're into that. This video is more so just like, hey, if you buy one at a good price, here's how to set it up. And, you know, just in case you want something different besides the Clifford. But yeah, there you go, man. Going off-road or towing, I think the Clifford's stronger. But, you know, like I said, if you think I did something wrong, let me know and I can retest them. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. All right, guys. I'll see you on the next video. Thanks.